Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.
You have probably seen her image in the aisles of your local supermarket. If you live in Atlanta or San Francisco or Minneapolis or Philadelphia or New York or Chicago or other places too numerous to mention, you might have seen her on the morning television shows. Maybe you read about her and the company she and her husband founded called Fire and Flavor in one of the many national magazines in which their company has been featured. Or maybe you read one of her best-selling books, Gourmet Made Simple, released in 2008, or Southern My Way, Food and Family, released in 2013, published by another one of her companies called Gena Knox Media. Or maybe you're like me and watched her grow up in the not-so-populated town of Reynolds, Georgia. And maybe you noticed her as a little girl selling peaches and produce out of the back of a pickup truck in the middle of town. Or maybe you noticed her babysitting little kids like my own kid and my niece and nephew to make a few extra dollars. Or maybe you saw her as she got older and more beautiful running through the streets of Reynolds, always in shape and always pushing herself. Or maybe you knew her at the University of Georgia where she received a degree in landscape architecture, or have been entertained by her at one of her dinner parties. Or maybe you knew her when she lived in Sea Island, Georgia, as she began her career in her field of study. Or maybe you knew her in Athens, Georgia, as a real estate agent extraordinaire, or as a founding member of Ansley Real Estate in Athens. If you're not yet impressed, you should also know Gena was chosen in 2008 by Georgia Trend magazine as a finalist in their 40 Under 40 list, which represents the brightest and best among the rising young leaders in Georgia. Inc. magazine had Fire and Flavor ranked 264th of the 5,000 fastest growing private companies in the United States, and number 8 in the top 100 food and beverage companies. Gena did not reach success by mistake. Her journey has been intentional, and there are lessons to be learned. Maybe you already know Gena, but just in case, you will meet her here today.
This is Chicago's very own WGN News at Noon.
Everybody, but we are talking about lunch. What a better way to celebrate Memorial Day than with a big, fat, greasy burger. What do you think?
Absolutely.
Well, Gena Knox is joining us today with Fire and Flavor, and you're going to tell us how to make one of these plank burgers, I guess.
Yes, actually, grilling planks are a great way to do burgers, and we're going to do alder plank turkey burgers today. So they're a little bit healthier, and the fact that you're cooking on a grilling plank gives it an extra smoky flavor. And this recipe is from my new cookbook, Gourmet Made Simple.
This is Channel 4 News, working for you.
We'll meet Wyatt a bit. Right now, here's Aaron with that good cooking. I think that's gourmet over there, isn't it?
I thought it was gourmet, is what you said. Is that the
That's because
Iowan
I'm just a
term
classless
for it?
country boy.
Yeah, we are in for a treat today. Our first guest is going to give us the inside scoop on how to create wonderful meals without all the fuss. And that's what we're talking about here. Gena Knox is feverishly cooking over here. You got a lot of stuff happening here. But you say it's easier than it appears to make something look gourmet and great. Huh?
Absolutely. All you need is fresh ingredients and a very simple, great recipe, and you're ready to go.
So we got the great...
Hi, this is Charlie Adler with I Drink on the Job with Gena Knox with Fire and Flavor. Gena, tell me a little bit about your product. You've got this cedar paper. I'd never heard of it.
Yeah,
what exactly is it?
These are great. They're really fun for summer. It's actually similar to a cedar grilling plank. It's a veneer of a cedar plank. So you basically just take the paper, and once you soak it in water, it becomes really bendable, and you can wrap it around any kind of fish or seafood or vegetables. And it comes with cotton string, and you tie it up. And the beauty of these, you can actually cook on your outdoor grill or in an indoor grill pan.
I've got my friend Gena Knox with me, Gena Neely Knox. I knew her as Gena Neely as she was growing up in our little town of Reynolds, Georgia. Gena, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can.
Thank you so much, and for being here and doing me a favor and jumping on this podcast. I know you're a busy gal, But I do thank you for getting on here. I think people will enjoy this story. I think they'll be inspired by your story. And I don't even know all your story, but I do know this. As I was traveling around the country and I'd walk in airports and I would see these big cooking books with your picture on it in bookstores and airports. I've been in grocery stores and all over the country and see this big sign with your picture on it. And every time I see that, I tell people, I know her. And they look at me like, you are lying. I said, no, I really know her. She used to babysit my kid. I said, no way. I said, yep, she did. And my niece and nephew too. So
Yep, I did.
that's been a few years ago. So Gena, let's first talk about you guys. I guess when you were very young, you moved from Butler to Reynolds, right?
Correct. Yeah, I was 2 years old when we built that house in Reynolds.
Yeah. And so I watched you grow up, not only as a little girl, just your parents, Tommy and Joan, are wonderful people. I don't know if anybody I've got more respect for from Tommy and Joan. I remember when Tommy first started playing golf, and I think he plays golf all the time now. But when he first started, he would call my dad and say, can you meet me at the golf course? And so I don't know if you knew that, but Daddy started playing with Tommy when he first started playing. And Tommy got the bug for sure playing golf.
Well, he played a lot because I tell you what, I still remember the phone number to the golf course. I'm 45 now.
Yeah, 4546. Is that it?
That's right. That's all you had to dial too.
Yeah. So my son Luke, when the Reynolds plantation opened, he would be in the pro shop down there, and people would get it mixed up.
Yes.
And they would call the Reynolds Golf Club and think they had Reynolds Plantation, and they would want a tee time. Luke would say, we got to open it at 1:02 p.m. Thank you. But they would get over to Reynolds Plantation. I can promise you they didn't have a tea time. But anyway, so you've done very well in life. You've just impressed the heck out of me with all the stuff that you have done and that you are doing. I know part of your success is your parents, Tommy and Joan. I didn't finish. Kathy and Joan used to walk together every day. I mean, almost every day, these long distance walks.
Yes.
But tell me about them. Tell me about them and their influence on you. I know they had a lot.
They definitely did. Both my parents are hard workers and definitely good people. So thank you for that. And yeah, I mean, my mom always had, a little side business next to raising 3 kids in Reynolds, Georgia, which was a full-time job because, my dad played a lot of golf. And then my dad was, he kind of grew up in Warm Springs with the same really background I feel like that he gave me of not really being allowed to have a laid back summer without having to work a little bit. And his dad always kind of set up little jobs for him. And that's exactly what Daddy did for me growing up. So I started with just little things. My mom catered different weddings and a party. So if there was ever something to do there, I was serving or helping prep in the kitchen and so forth. But Daddy always, every summer, would have something for us, whether it was, I can remember when I was 13. I was 12. And I would wake up in the summer to a note that was to tell me what I was supposed to do that day.
Right.
And I was to get the pickup truck, the Chevy pickup truck, and go, that dirt road across from our driveway on 96 and cut through the dirt road and go pick up Jacqueline Bird, Buster's daughter, who was probably 9 or 10. And then we were to go out to the farm, going towards Marshallville, and meet one of the guys that worked on the farm, and he loaded our pickup truck. And I was, again, 12, and I don't think I'd ever driven by myself through town, but I did.
Right.
And he loaded the pickup truck with silver queen corn that Daddy and Buster had planted a garden for Mama and Miss Charlene that ended up being, a couple of acres of silver queen corn. So we went into town with a pickup truck full of corn and had to sell them, a dozen ears for 50 cents or whatever. And it was like, end of July in Reynolds, Georgia. It was hot as Hades. But we set up right across from your sister-in-law's house in downtown Reynolds and sold. So we always had little jobs like that, or selling peaches on the roadside. There was just always something that he had set up for us to do to keep us busy, and of course learn valuable lessons. So I think that's kind of where my work ethic started. And then my mom was super creative and all the different things she did. And so they just passed it on.
So, folks, I'm gonna say you're listening to Gena Knox, who has become a very successful entrepreneur, and you're getting a lesson in how to raise your kids from her parents, because a lot of people don't get that. That I grew up having to work, Gena. I worked in my dad's store as long as I can remember, and I had to earn my money. When I bought my first car, it was $775, a 1964 push button Plymouth. And I paid for it with the money that I'd saved in the store. Times have changed a little bit, but I think that what you're talking about is a key. And I know from a distance, you're doing the same thing with your kids. And we'll talk about that in a minute, because I've seen it on social media. And I immediately thought that's going on to the next generation of what you did. So I saw you doing that, and I saw you always working. Your daddy was the banker, and he was. It's not like you were doing this because to make extra money for the family. You were doing it just what you just said. They were making sure you knew that you had to work to make it in this life. You had to earn your way. Isn't that true?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I couldn't just, none of us, I have two siblings, and none of us could just sit around in the summer and, do nothing or swim all day. And we did a lot of that, but we also just always, all three of us had some kind of side job to do. And it's really paid off. It was just valuable lessons that I hope I'm passing down to my children.
Well, you are, and we'll talk about that. But the thing you just said too is a key. You also had balance in your life. You had jobs to do, but you guys had a great time, had a great life, had fun, had great friends, played a lot. The other thing I noticed, and of course, I remember you as a little girl and you started growing up. And the next thing I'm noticing, and I think this probably played into what you began to do with your fire and flavor thing, but you were always running. You were always exercising. You were always pushing yourself in self-discipline to be in shape. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I don't know where, I guess I got it from my mom, but I'm super disciplined in life, even now. And, but it's just how I operate, and it just keeps me on track. And I think it just keeps my mind focused.
Well, you were doing that as a young girl. And I remember seeing you running like a deer, through the streets, and you weren't just jogging, you were running. And so I know part of what you did in the food business is, a lot of it is geared toward health. I mean, you always look at that, right? And what you ended up doing, left Reynolds, you went to the University of Georgia.
Yes, sir.
And you studied landscape architecture, right?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And in there, you met your future husband while you were at Georgia.
That's right.
Tell us about that whole deal. You're studying landscape. How'd you get into that?
Well, I've always loved like design in general, whether it's interior, exterior, but I love the outdoors. I kind of grew up in the woods playing all the time. And, my mom was always a big gardener. So it just kind of all tied together, and just wanted to do something in the outdoor field. I kind of toyed with doing like wildlife biology, but I quickly realized all the science classes were not for me. So I had to study design and landscape architecture, and it was right before all the AutoCAD and all that came out. So there was lots of hand drafting and hand lettering, and I'm still, now that I live in Athens, I'm very close with one of my professors I had, but it was super fun, and it just fit my personality too, because it was you got out of it what you put in it, and it was lots of multiple hour labs and like I said, drafting and 8 o'clock classes and everything. But I loved it, and I loved learning the design history, and I think all the design background of that, and learning all the plants and everything, and has really paid off in what I do now, which is sell real estate and sell houses and help people, envision what they're buying and what it could be.
Sure.
And
Sure.
so it's kind of, God sets you up for certain things that, you'll use later in life, which I love.
Yeah. So when you started, you didn't know how you were going to be using it, but you certainly used it, right?
I worked as a landscape architect right out of college at Sea Island, which was amazing. That was like, a great experience, no budgets, and, amazing clients and deep pockets, and just the world at your fingertips, and really getting introduced into this design world that I had never seen. Just these gorgeous homes and oceanfront property. It was such a fun job.
Oh, wow. How long did you do that?
Probably like a year and a half. And then
Yeah.
I got married and moved to Atlanta. We tried to stay in St. Simons actually, but it was the job market in St. Simons was like, unless my husband wanted to be a bartender, it was pretty slim back then.
So speaking of your husband, Davis, he's a pretty entrepreneurial, spirited guy as well, right?
He is, yes.
Yeah. So you guys met. How'd you meet?
We met at Georgia. I walked into his house as a potential, like to look at it to rent with his landlord, and we met there. And he asked me out on a date, and I went, and it was a very nice date, but I didn't like him. And then he graduated, and it was probably a year and a half later that he was back in town for a football game, and I ran into him, and then we kind of started dating since that.
About that. How long have you been married?
We will be married in September. Will be 20 years.
Oh, wow.
I know.
Time goes, doesn't it?
It does. It makes me feel old.
So before we get in the real estate piece of it, I know you also, and you learned from your mom, and you talked about the catering business, and from your grandmother, you love to cook even at an early age, right?
Yes, I have always loved to cook. Just think I got lots of training growing up. I mean, Mama would always make me, I remember her making one of the notes I got left in the summer when I woke up, and it was I had to make these lemon drop cookies, and she left the recipe. It was for a bake sale that what was the thing next to the post office, like the women's something that in Reynolds.
Yeah. Women's Club. Yeah.
Women's Club. That's it.
Yeah.
They had a bake sale, and I had to make the cookies. And I remember they like ran all over the cookie sheet, and they didn't work out. They just became one large cookie. And she made me make those like 3 days in a row until I figured out what I did wrong. She would never tell me. And I kept melting the butter instead of softening it. So she always made me kind of learn little tricks like that. And then when I got to college and, wanted to eat well, but didn't have her cooking, I really started cooking and having dinner parties in college, and just have loved it ever since.
And took what you learned and got better and better at it. So I think in reading your story or knowing it, that at some point you can tell me when, but you began looking for planks. You got interested in this plank cooking, right? Tell us a little bit about how all that happened.
Yeah. So I think it was probably 2002. Right when I got married, actually, I read an article in a cooking magazine about cedar planks and plank grilling, like cedar plank salmon. And so I ordered some online and tried it out. And I was just completely amazed at how easy and flavorful it was, and such an awesome way to cook fish, because you don't have to flip the fish and it doesn't, break up in pieces all over your grill. And so I started kind of researching, because I couldn't really find them other than ordering them out of the Pacific Northwest. And after some research, I was like, these things should be sold in all the seafood markets and the grocery stores. So I kind of took that idea and just sourced, it has to be Western red cedar, which is native to the Pacific Northwest. And I sourced some lumber and just started selling them at like the Merchandise Mart in Atlanta. And literally like at $5 for 2 boards, and a day and a half, I sold like $6,000 worth of planks. So I kind of took it from there and walked into Whole Foods buying office in Atlanta and sold it right into that chain, just the southeast portion of Whole Foods at the time. And it just kind of took off. And of course I was learning as I went, and I delivered a pallet of cedar planks to the Whole Foods distribution center in my Volvo station wagon. And kind of learn from there.
It's crazy. So you had these things delivered like to your house, and you made them into planks you could sell, or how did they come?
Yeah, I ordered them. At first I was just buying Western red cedar fence boards and cutting them I hired a guy to cut them into 15-inch planks, and we dry them and shrink wrap them and do it right in our garage. And
so
then
how'd you learn how to do that? Just look it up or figure it out, or what? How did you?
Yeah, just trial and error, really. I mean, trying to get the wood, fence boards were kind of the best way for me to go, because they were already, planed and cut into the right thickness. And then we just cut them into the right lengths. I had just some guy, I don't know how I found him, that I hired to do it. And then we kind of grew into a little warehouse in Atlanta. And then that's how we ended up in Athens. I found a big warehouse for like $2 a square foot, which is impossible to do now. But so I commuted from Atlanta to Athens, to my warehouse and had, 5 or 6 employees, and did that for about a year. And then we moved over here to Athens. So yeah, I mean, it was just literally just like any job. You learn something new every day. You make mistakes, you learn from them, and you just kind of keep plowing through.
Well, what the reality is that your company became one of the fastest growing companies in the United States. I mean, it was in the top 50, right? And even in
we were the Inc. 500, yeah, like the top couple of hundred of food companies. And yeah, I mean, it was just super fun experience, and just getting into all those, I traveled at a super young age, in my early 20s, to every grocery store headquarters in the country, from Safeway in California to Stop and Shop up in Massachusetts, and sold them into seafood departments.
So people that's listening to this is the same girl that her dad and mama made her go get peaches and fruit and stuff and sell them for 50 cents. She had this idea that she had to work in life, and she had this entrepreneurial spirit. They were not even in teaching her how to cook cookies. You learn it. They were not doing it for her. And now you've got an adult, 20-something years old, traveling all over the country, walking. I mean, you just said that the first time you delivered the planks to a supermarket warehouse in your station wagon, right? Is that what you said?
I did. Yeah. In my Volvo station wagon.
That is unbelievable. So at what point did Davis join you? At some point, we got something going on here. It's going to take both of us. Is that kind of how that happened?
Yeah, I think I hit about $1 million in sales, and I had been commuting from Atlanta to Athens for about a year, and he decided to leave his job. And I think he commuted for about a week, and then he said, "We're moving." But Athens wasn't, of course, super hard to turn down, since we both went to Georgia. And, yeah, we moved over, and we're in the same house that we bought back then. That we kind of grew into the house and started having kids, and it's been a great place to be.
So I spent 4 years of my life and about 6 years of my daddy's money in Athens. I can tell you that. And I was on Millage Avenue most of that, 990 South Millage, as a matter of fact. So I'm very familiar. So
right off Millage, it's booming now. Everybody wants to be in Athens, especially after we won that game.
Oh yeah, oh man, that was something, wasn't it?
It was.
So this company began growing and going crazy, and you've been on TV shows across the country. You're doing cooking shows from really all the big city markets, right? I mean, you've been all over the place, not only calling on these businesses, but you became a celebrity cook, TV cook, or whatever you call them, right?
Well, I don't know about celebrity, but I did some, like morning shows and stuff, and teaching people how to cook. I ended up doing a couple of cookbooks, which was really just more hobby than anything, because I love to cook, and I love the creative aspect of recipe development and the photography and stuff. So I had fun, doing the morning shows and stuff like that.
But the books sold, they had to, because I saw them all over everywhere. I mean, there's no telling how many of those books. You sent us some books, sent us some plank. It was just crazy what you were doing. My gosh, it's an incredible story.
Thank you.
It's an inspiring story. The reason I want to tell it, because there's parents that could learn from your parents, and there's younger people coming up and their ceiling may be much higher than they believe, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And you had no idea when you started this that would get that big, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's been fun, and it's been, we made mistakes. Believe me, it wasn't always, a bed of roses, but that's just part of having your own business, and you learn from it and keep moving.
There's no question about it. So let's talk about your kids. And I remember, and I don't know, I guess I saw it on social media, but I just laughed and smiled, because you have your kids selling peaches. You got Wainwright's peaches, or I guess you had, or maybe Lane's peaches, one of the two or both. They out there selling peaches on Millage Avenue.
Yeah, so I have 4 kids, and I think my 4th one wasn't even born. And just the same thing that my dad did for me. I was like, y'all can't just sit around and go to summer camp all summer. So I went down to, I think, Reynolds. I mean, we get them from Wainwright's, Dickey's, Lane's, Pearson's. We kind of alternate, and drove down and got a pickup truck of peaches, and made them sit out on Millage and sell them. Of course, it's never, cool in June and July here in Georgia, but and they love it though. They loved it. And then of course they have the benefit now of we have social media. So I just post on Instagram and I'll get like 70 boxes pre-orders. I mean, where I have to like pay a college guy to go down with a trailer and get peaches for me. And then the kids, load them up in everybody's cars. And I saved several boxes for them to go set up a stand on Millage. And everybody knows they're the peach kids, and it's really fun.
Oh my. So just to remind you, it's hot in Athens on Millage Avenue in June and July, but it was also hot in Reynolds, Georgia, in June and July when you were doing that. I can promise you it was not cool. It's just in Reynolds, you just had a lot more gnats.
That's right. That is right. We sat up there with fabric softener sheets, just fanning those to keep the gnats away.
So do you realize how fortunate your kids are?
Well, they are. Thank you for that.
But they really are, and it goes back to Tommy and Joan and the way they were raised, and it passes down, and you're creating them. They're seeing a work ethic that many people don't see. So now I got to ask you, now you got in the real estate business. So tell me what you're doing there. There's no question. I'm sure you're already successful with it.
Well, so yeah, I basically worked helping with Davis run Fire and Flavor till I had right when I had our third kid. I worked full time, then took off, a couple of years, had a fourth. And I think maybe 2 weeks after the fourth was born, I was like, okay, it's time to get back to work. It just, it's hard for me to sit still very long. So I decided I'll just get my real estate license, because Davis was basically running Fire and Flavor, and he kind of had it all running smooth without me. And, it is nice to have, after working together for 15 years, have a little separation between raising 4 kids and working together.
Yeah.
So I just literally studied my tail off and got my license, thinking like, well, I'll just have it. If I want to use it, I will. If I don't, no big deal. But I just joined a firm here in town and just took off. And it is very much an entrepreneurial environment when you're a real estate agent, because you're basically working for yourself. I mean, you get out what you put in it. You can brand yourself, you can market yourself. And, I did have a little marketing background with Fire and Flavor. So that was, 3 years ago. And then most recently, I just helped open the Athens office of Ansley Real Estate, which is a very, very nice, large Atlanta-based real estate company that has expanded to different parts of Georgia, like the lakes and St. Simons and Sea Island and different areas of Atlanta. So we just opened the Athens office, and it's been lots of fun. It's a career for me that I can kind of combine all my previous experiences, from design to all the marketing and the sales that I did at Fire and Flavor. I just kind of put it all in one hat and do real estate. And it just is a perfect fit, because it is so much fun, but I learned something new every single day, because every transaction is different, and it keeps my brain, moving and challenged. And I meet awesome people and great relationships. So I'm super blessed that I've found this niche where I can use, all my skills and be successful and educate these 4 kids and, just keep moving as a mom with a flexible schedule. It's just a perfect fit.
Wow. Well, I've got friends in Athens area that's going to be listening to this. So when you get ready to buy real estate, this is your person, Gena Knox. You won't find a better one. I can promise you that, to do whatever you're doing. So that's a little free advertisement for you.
I appreciate it.
But not that you need it, I can promise.
Yes.
What a story. If you had to do something over, if you could give advice to somebody that's starting off and trying to figure out what they're going to do with life, what would you tell them? I mean, you're somebody that they would listen to, I can tell you, because of your track record.
Well, thank you. Well, I mean, I think, working hard and just staying focused and staying positive. I heard a speech a couple of days ago at an Ansley real estate event about not letting the negative voice in you ever speak. And just, if you believe and think positive things happen. And I very much believe that. But, I think everything I've done, I feel like I'm a huge believer in that God has a plan, and every experience we have, there's a reason for it. And it just sets us up for success later in life. So yes, we made tons of mistakes growing a business like Fire and Flavor, but those are all things we learned from. So, I'm sure I'd change a few things like that if I were to go back, but overall, I'm just very blessed. And I think just staying focused and working hard will get you far.
One thing's for sure is everybody makes mistakes. Everybody has tough times. That's what makes us. I mean, whether it's personal, professional, So, Gena, thank you so much for doing this. If you got anything you want to say,
No, I just thank you for having me, and y'all are an amazing family, and I think your podcasts are awesome, and you have amazing experiences that I'm glad you're sharing with everybody.
Yeah, well, it's fun. I'm having a good time, and I think there's more to come. You're a very inspirational lady, and
Thank you very much.
I respect you. I'm proud of you. I'm thankful that you came from our little town of Reynolds. I've said many times, it's amazing the people that came out of that little town, and you're certainly at the top of that list of what you've accomplished and what you will accomplish. There's no telling where your life will take you, and you're certainly not done. Gena, thank you so much, and I appreciate you. I love you very much. Thank you for doing me this great honor. I do thank you.
Thank you. I love you too.
I had Gena on today for a reason. Back in September of 2008, I was in a hotel room one night in Oklahoma City. I was nervously reading what was going on in the world that day. Lehman Brothers was preparing to declare bankruptcy, and Merrill Lynch was in the process of getting bailed out by Bank of America. The insurance giant AIG was getting ready to lend itself $20 billion in an attempt to stay afloat in the face of cuts to its debt rating. It seemed the sky was falling. As I was nervously processing all that, I happened to see an email that a legend of a house builder by the name of Neil Hinton Jr. had passed away in my little hometown of Reynolds, Georgia. It dawned on me that night that the high-flying, high-rolling Wall Street fat cats could have learned a lesson or two from the house builder from Reynolds. That night in that hotel, as I read Neil Hinton's obituary, my thoughts left the troubled financial world and went back to him. He was a master carpenter who became a master building contractor. At one time, all four of his carpenter brothers worked for him. Later, his son would become his business partner. I never saw his motto on a sign in front of a house he was building, nor did I see it on a sign at the hardware building supply store he owned and operated. In fact, I never even heard him say it. But his reputation and his motto was known by everyone who knew him. It was fairly simple, too. If you want to build a house right, let Neil do it. If it's the cheapest price you're looking for, go somewhere else. Neil certainly never overcharged for his services, but he never cut corners when it came to building a house. In fact, he refused to cut corners when it came to building a house. Interestingly, most of us can't tell a well-built house from a shoddily built house when we look at it from the outside. The basic appearance looks pretty much the same. But when you start comparing the foundations and the flooring, and the amount of lumber used, and the craftsmanship and the detail, anyone can quickly tell the difference. I remember that night a story from many years earlier. My wife and I were about to build our first house in 1978. I stopped by Neil's office with our simple house plans and asked him to work up a price for me. Since I was just out of college, I figured I would do the prudent thing and get another contractor from a neighboring county to also bid on the same house. When I got both bids back, the contractor from the neighboring county was substantially lower than Neil Hinton. I stopped by my daddy's house that night and told him I had two bids on the same house, and the one from the neighboring county was much less expensive, and I had decided to use him. He told me I was grown and could do whatever I wanted, but before I made a decision, he suggested that he and I go look at a couple of houses being built. I was 23 years old. The next day, we did that. We drove up at one house under construction by the contractor with a cheaper price. From the outside, it looked good enough to me. It looked like a house. We walked in, I looked around and looked up. I had absolutely no expertise in house construction. It looked fine to me. Daddy was quiet, and I was not sure what he was doing. Then we got in his car and drove to a house in town that Neil was building. Outside, it looked like a house, but when I walked in the door, my mouth fell open. There was much more lumber in this house than the other house. There was no comparison. Even someone like me who knew nothing about house building could see that. I could not believe the difference in the quality of the two houses. The bottom line is we made the decision to pay the extra money and let Neil Hinton build our house. I could not help but think about this when I considered what was going on with the Lehman Brothers and Merrill Lynch's of the world that day. When we looked at them from our glancing perspective, they looked rather formidable. But inside, their earnings were not from recurring businesses, but their earnings depended on a combination of huge leverage and huge risk and ridiculously overcompensated employees, and not a lot of lumber. Their houses were falling along with their stock prices. It seemed to me that night they chose selfishness over the long-term health of the house they were building. I have come to understand if we're not careful, we can follow that same path and end up not having enough lumber and craftsmanship and detail in the lives we're building. We may look successful to others on the outside for a time, but inside we may not have much lumber. Lumber like integrity, kindness, work ethic, consistency, self-discipline, and faith in a God who guides our steps. From the outside, people look basically the same, but inside, people are different. Many take shortcuts in building their lives. They get it built, and it looks formidable to us all on the outside. But when they fall, there's a great crash. Gena Knox's story and success in life is not an accident. What she accomplishes in the future will not be an accident either, nor will what their children accomplish one day in the future. She was raised by parents who made sure her foundation was strong. They were not stingy on the lumber either. They required things of her for her long-term good, even if it was costly for her in the short term. There were no shortcuts allowed. When she woke up in the mornings, her dad had written a note of a task she had to complete. When she messed up on the cookies, her mom did not do it for her. She allowed her to figure it out, even if it took a while. Extra lumber, detail, and craftsmanship were being added to her life that would benefit her much later in life. When Gena saw the cooking planks that she talked about and saw that they were difficult to purchase, she did not say somebody should make them available in stores. Instead, she ordered Western red cedar fence boards, and by trial and error, figured out how to make cedar cooking planks in her garage, kind of like she did when learning how to make cookies as a kid. She just kept at it. Lumber. Lots of lumber. It wasn't long before she and her husband were running a multi-million-dollar business, and her products were being sold in all 50 states. Later, after having 4 children and leaving the company to her husband to run, she has now reinvented herself in the real estate business, where she is using everything she has learned in business and in life to be successful. And in the meantime, she's making sure her own kids have plenty of lumber in their lives. And I quote Gena as to what we just heard her say. She said, "I am a huge believer that God has a plan, and with every experience we have, there's a reason for it, and it sets us up for success later in life. There are no shortcuts to real success." I view life from a hearse. That means I view life with the end in mind. When you view life with the end in mind, it changes everything.
Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.